Ready, Mike? All right. So I'm going to try to stay away from the mic as much as possible. But thank you so much for joining us this evening at our Green Speakers Series. My name is Grant Ervin. I'm with S&B USA, which is an infrastructure development and construction company based here in Pittsburgh over the north side. And John's going to tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. But excited to have everybody here today. We have a tight and dedicated audience, recognizing that we have a couple of, I'm going to call it extraneous circumstances in terms of major events that are happening in Pittsburgh. And everybody was basically told to avoid downtown like the plague because of those events. So we really thank you for your dedication, and we are recording and will also be sharing and streaming this event so that those that could not be with us because of traffic and all of the activities happening around town with the presidential candidates visiting our fair city, which we're proud to have them. So that's a good thing. So we just want to thank you for being here with us this evening. We have a great lineup with us today. We're going to do introductions here in a minute, but maybe just to set the table. So this is the final event in the series that we put on thanks to the support of Volpac Construction. And when we were conceptualizing this content, one of the big things that we realized was the rapid advancements in technology that are occurring in the building and construction industry. And so we felt that this would be kind of the capstone event for 2024 in terms of what does technology have to do with it, which I think is a very apropos title. Catchy, could become a song title maybe in the future, we'll see. But we pulled together a great lineup here for you today. We're going to talk about some of the different challenges and opportunities that are occurring in the technology space and how it influences us in the building and construction world. So without further ado, I'd like maybe Michael to start with introductions, and we'll just kind of roll down the line here, and then I'll dive into some really hard-hitting questions.
Great.
But Michael, we'll start with you with interest.
I'm Michael Volpat. I'm the Vice President of Marketing and Innovation at Volpac Construction. I came to the company 2 years ago to think about how we use things like technology to build more sustainably throughout the projects that we do. So we've been around for 33 years, and my brother and I are carrying on our father's legacy, which we're very proud of.
Awesome.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Azadeh Sawyer. Is this too loud? I feel like I need to go backwards. Okay. I'm Azadeh Sawyer. I'm assistant professor at Carnegie Mellon School of Architecture. I'm also the track chair of Building Performance and Diagnostics. And technology is pretty much embedded in everything I teach and research.
Hello, my name is John Astfalk. I am the CIO at S&B USA. We're a heavy highway civil engineering construction firm here in Pittsburgh. We do a little bit more than that. We have a presence in EV concessions, but a lot of people know that, might not know, that we have a presence known as Joseph B. Fay. So we've been around the Pittsburgh area for about 76 years now, working on the Pittsburgh International Airport, the Beaver Valley Bridge, and we apologize in advance for 2026 when we shut down the Parkway East for the Commercial Street Bridge. We're sorry. Oh, yeah, for 1 month, yes.
So if you live in the eastern suburbs, under the advisement of our companies, you should.
We're letting you know right now.
Schedule vacation. Thanks, Joanne.
Hi, I'm Brittany. I'm founder and CEO of a company called QFlow. We're working with Volpac Construction, and we help construction teams track materials and waste during construction. I'm a civil engineer, but I have been dragged kicking and screaming into the technology world to try and help our industry become more sustainable and more efficient.
Hi, I'm Beth Eckenrode. I'm co-founder of the AUROS group. We are in Carnegie, Pennsylvania, right on Main Street, downtown Carnegie, next to Scoops. And we sit at the intersection of building science and data science. So we go really deep on all things zero energy, and then we go really deep on all things data. How do you make your data accessible and usable? How does an owner have control over their data? And that is the only way that we can answer the question we set out to answer, which is, how do I know my building is performing as I paid for it to perform?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Bibhuti Aryal. I'm based in Pittsburgh. I'm representing Bentley Systems. It's a Pennsylvania-based company that's working globally. We have presence in 100-plus countries around the world. So this topic is of deep interest to us because Bentley is an infrastructure software engineering company that believes that infrastructure digital twins have the power to make significant improvements to the way we live and design and build and operate our assets. So very excited about the topic here tonight. I've been in Pittsburgh for almost 36 years, so I know this area pretty well. Very first time here in the Duquesne Club, so thank you for the invite. It's a wonderful place to be with all of you here today.
So, you know what, in Bibhuti, you just started with the term digital twins. And one of the things that I think about, this question's for everyone, but I want to start, kind of with Bibhuti on this side. When we talk about technology, we oftentimes, it gets dizzying. There's a lot of new terminology that is getting thrown around in the marketplace: digital twins, AR, VR, AI, and it's almost assumed that we all know.
Yeah.
Right? And so my question to everybody is, what is the starting point with regards to technology? Quickly, we jump into data and how do we manage data? It might be software, it might be hardware, but when you're initiating a conversation about technology, what's the beginning point for you? We'll start with you.
Great question, and I guess I went right in there with the term like digital twin. So I represent our industry solutions group in Bentley for transportation, but we have industry solutions for energy, water, cities and campuses, as well as transportation. But when we think about solutions, we don't start with technology first. We start with, what are the problems we're looking to solve? And in the industry that I'm most interested in, transportation, unfortunately or fortunately for companies like us, there are a lot of problems to solve. We have aging infrastructure, and Pittsburgh is well known, and Pennsylvania as a whole is well known for that. We have climate change that's causing our infrastructure to have to be much more resilient. It was not designed to sustain the flooding and the type of weather events that it's having to sustain, as we're seeing throughout this country and throughout the world. And all of it's having to be done with a dwindling workforce. So when we talk about we don't start with technology. We're looking at the problems we're looking to solve. But often within those problems, there are technology solutions. So those terminologies like digital twins, which is really talking about how do you bring the most information you have about something together in a way that makes sense for the people that need to deal with it. So we're talking about closing down bridges. Well, how do we pull all of the information about that bridge together? When was it designed? How was it designed? What are the elements of that bridge? How was it maintained? What's the current condition? What does the surrounding area look like? If we bring all of that information together, the people that actually have to work on that bridge can do that work safer, faster, and then hopefully, reopen that bridge quicker because they have a lot more information about the work that they're trying to do. So we really start with the problem in mind first, and technology has a way to solve those problems by bringing a lot of data together and using, newfangled things like AI, ML, and AR, VR, so that people can actually take a thing like a bridge from the field and bring it into the office and do things like inspections in the office. Those things are actually possible through technology, but we don't start with the technology. We start with the problems we're looking to solve.
I'm wondering if we get bonus points if we can use more acronyms in a project. Like if you do a digital twin.
Somebody has to take a shot.
Yeah, that would be super win. Yeah. Beth, how about yourself? What is the starting point for you in your work?
Yeah, so taking what Bibhuti said and clicking at a level deeper maybe in the built environment, we would translate that into use cases. The problem with use cases, though, is number one, a client can come up with a lot of use cases, and technology can solve a lot of use cases, and none of them have any return on investment. So the challenge is to connect the question of what problem are you trying to solve and what's the specific use case to what constitutes success and how will you measure success. And the beautiful part about where we are in technology today is all of those things exist. Nothing has to be made. So now it's just a matter of bringing the proper tools to pull the right weapon for the right solution, right? And so if you do that, then technology can really be a bonus. But it can be a big, giant hairball, too, in that, you can start to pull on something, and before you know it, you're paying for 900 use cases, and you don't have a return on investment, and it can get pretty messy. So it takes a really clear line of sight to what will you measure, and how do you define success?
That's great. Brittany, what's your starting point?
I mean, I would agree with both those points. The way I think about it is always pain or problem, the people, and the potential. So 3 Ps.
Okay, that's catchy. In Pittsburgh, that's often thought of. Right? Yeah,
it's like it was made for it.
Yeah.
And I think where we've seen technology really fail is when it doesn't think about people and the use and the sort of usability. And this has never been so true as for in construction, where digital literacy and tech literacy are typically very low. And there's not a great deal of trust of technology in our industry, let's be honest. So if you don't think about the people up front and their acceptability of the tech, the trust, the usability in particular, it's just guaranteed to fail. So when we founded Qflow, we very much focused on the pain, the problem we were solving first. Like, was it big enough? Was there an ROI even there? How are we going to make that usable, approachable, trustable by the people? And so simplicity of use was like the main thing that we focused on. It was our and it still is our number one priority, is the people piece. And then also the potential. And I think coming back to your great point about ROI, you can solve problems in a million different ways, but if you're not really realizing the potential of that technology, it's a complete waste of time and money, and it really just winds people up. So I'd really always just condense it into those 3 things in that order as well. Pain, are you solving something that's worth solving? Are you doing it in a way that people can do it? And then are you realizing that potential in solving it?
It's interesting to pick up on this too. So transportation, buildings, and then you have a civil engineering background, correct? Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about your evolution coming from civil into technology. I'm curious.
So I became a civil engineer because I wanted to solve a problem. So I actually, this is so random, I started in musical theatre. And for a very long time, I was going into the West End. I have a diploma in classical singing. I was trained in opera.
So you could actually use the microphone.
I legit could. I could whack out a little bit of Mozart right now. I'd be fine. But what I found was I wasn't solving a problem that I cared about. And I ended up working a lot in international development and fell in love with this problem of how do we make people's lives easier, more pain-free. And I ended up working in Uganda, and I found that the things that were really holding a lot of these communities back were just accessibility of water. They were spending hours collecting water because it was miles away. And so that accessibility to infrastructure became so critical. So roads, pumping, sanitation. And so through this like weird interest in sanitation and this specific problem for people, I ended up going down the civil engineering route. However, falling in love with engineering and infrastructure, I also realized that there were a whole other load of pains associated with being a civil engineer, and most notably spending hours and a lot of love and commitment into building and designing something that was going to be sustainable and efficient and effective for people, but then releasing it to the contractors, no offense, Michael, and finding that we didn't know how that was being built and whether actually what we'd designed and specified was going into implementation, and this thing called value engineering was kicking in. And it was really hard to know whether those efforts were realizing
That's basically
their potential.
Accountants with engineering degrees, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's basically do it cheaper and quicker, which is legit. That's what the industry is driven by. And, you know, if we don't acknowledge that we are profit driven, we must make a profit. That's our first thing as any company. If you can't make a profit, you're not sustainable. You can't continue to pay people and grow. Like that's the end of the line.
Right.
So but not having that feedback meant that we couldn't improve. And so we weren't realizing the potential of the industry. So yeah, being a civil engineer, but still being obsessed with solving problems that made people's lives better and realize their true potential is how QFlow kind of evolved out of this love and deep frustration with this amazing industry.
That's awesome. John, to pivot to you a little bit, I mean, you've seen kind of both of these worlds intersect in kind of your space, but day to day, and I know this just because I get a chance to work with you, but like the challenges of technology and starting at the right place is omnipresent. So what is it for you?
So for us, everyone knows, or maybe not everyone, that the construction labor force it's cutthroat. There's not enough people to fill seats. And when you say, hey, I have this solution for a problem that you guys might be having, the very first response from the field is, oh, you're replacing me. That's great. And then, nope, they're not going to do anything with that. So to echo what everyone has said is you need to understand what the real problem is. And most of the time, and I hate to say this being in the technology world, is it's not a technology solution that the problem actually is presenting. Technology can help, and it can help, augment what the workers are actually doing, but they are the ones that are bringing in the money. They are the ones doing all of the work and helping the company thrive. And the last thing you want to do is, lack of a better term, step on them and say, this technology is going to fix your problem, when in reality, it might actually be more of a hindrance than help. So really for us, it's truly understanding what the problem is and really listening to what the field is saying, that this is the problem that we're trying to fix, and asking the right questions too. Asking the right questions is a very valuable tool.
Interesting. Do you get a lot of opportunities or times when, whether it's the field or different business segments, are coming to you with a technology solution or plug-in, and the opposite occurs, right? Like where you're like, no, guys, that ain't it. Or, well, maybe like
every day. Not necessarily every day, but reality is that folks want to be, almost everyone wants to be better at what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And they're always going to be looking, and somebody's always going to be talking with them saying that, oh, I saw this ad, or this salesperson reached out to me, and this software is going to make our lives infinitely better based off of what they're saying. Well, that's where we come in and kind of partner with them and say, well, did you ask this question? Did you ask that question? Well, maybe if we looked at our own internal processes, we wouldn't need this potential software. Or, you know what, you're exactly right. This is the right thing to do. But having that open line of communication to the business and the different departments, that's what we preach in the technology group. We want to be business partners to operations, finance, HR, however whatever the needs are. Let's just be real. I mean, we could be replaced and outsourced at any moment. We're not really looked at as a revenue generating department. We're always looked at as, IT's the cost, the overhead, it's a necessary evil, waste management, the electric company, however you want to look at it.
Right.
We want to be the partner that says, okay, we trust them. They're going to give us the best solution to solve our problem.
That's interesting. Azada, for you, what is your starting point?
That's interesting, because when you started that question, I was going to say, well, it's very different for me because I'm in academia, and students come to me wanting to learn. Actually, now that you said acronym, students from SD, BPD, MARC, CMU is known for their acronyms. They come to me wanting to learn.
You just keep racking up the points.
AI, DT, VR, all of it. So I was going to say it's different for me, but I wear two hats. I teach, I also do research. And when I do research, I work with clients. So the thing about students coming to me and wanting to learn technology is that they think they can solve everything with technology. And the first thing that I do is I try to make sure that we're not solving the wrong problem correctly, which is what happens a lot. Students, they want to work on a thesis project. They want to use all kinds of technology. But the problem is like, it's the wrong problem, right? So I always tell them, let's go back. Let's figure out what your problem is. And then what are the tools that you need to solve this problem? So it's very similar to what was discussed on this panel. In terms of doing research, UPMC was our client. So I worked on the new hospital that's going up on Fifth Avenue. It used to be the Heart and Transplant, but it's now just the Presbyterian. And my work was on the facade. So how do we make sure that this facade is designed such that it helps with energy efficiency of the building, but also with patient recovery and well-being? So we needed to make sure that we allow a lot of daylight, we block glare, we don't lose a lot of energy. The first thing that I did was, you present to all these people and you realize, you know what? I need to talk to the nurses. Nurses are the ones that are going to understand what I'm trying to do. And in one meeting, in one session, so talking about value engineering, when you talk to the people that are using the building all the time, that care about the patient, doctors, nurses, all the end users, you realize what the important part of the building is, and then you fight for that, and they won't value engineer it because those people are going to fight for you. So I came up with this crazy design of kind of in-between louver system, and I thought it would be the first thing that would go, because when they value engineer, that's the first thing that goes. Just put blinds inside the building.
Right.
But I gave a very clear presentation to the people that said, listen, blinds are going to be closed most of the time, which means your patient won't have view. They also won't have the daylight that they need to set their circadian rhythm so they recover faster. Circadian rhythm is important. Yeah. Light is important. It's hormone production. But listen, who's going to go inside the building and close the blinds, open the blinds, close the blinds, open the blinds? Nobody. Nurses don't have time, right? So they were the ones that advocated for us, and they were the one that said, we need to make sure we design this properly. So if you don't want something to be value engineered, find out who has the most...
Who has the real power.
The real power.
That's awesome.
I mean, nurses should have the real power, and I think they do.
That's an awesome story. Michael, what is your starting point with regards to technology?
You've heard me say this a million times.
But they haven't.
Right. Construction, our margins are razor thin. And so for us, a starting point is, how do we leverage technology to make more money? Because if you're not profitable, you're not sustainable, right? So, and we had this conversation this morning in a meeting with CMU, with CDFD, which is the construction department. Yeah, CDFD, another acronym. And we presented QFlow to the team, and the first question was, why do I want to spend money on this, right? Like, how is it going to help me? And it was a tough conversation, but we did a really good job of explaining why we think, first of all, LEED version 5 is going to require, it's a requirement, it's to track embodied carbon, right? And to what level, we're not really sure yet, because they're still in public comments on LEED version 5, but it is going to be very challenging. If you have ever seen the EC3 database or the ICE database and have tried to navigate those free programs, it's really hard. And when we, at the Master Builders Association, we were given a tour of those two databases, and I thought to myself, I'm a small contractor. I can't hire a full-time employee or employees on a LEED project to navigate those databases. It's just very challenging, which is how we ended up finding QFlow. And I thought, okay, if we have to do this, at least there's a technology out there that will help us do it and help us do it more efficiently and effectively, without having to teach a team of people and pay a team of people how to do it. So that for us, that the concept of efficiency and profitability is always the starting point.
Is always the starting point. The next big question I had for everyone, and Michael, we'll start with you this time. the advances of all these technologies is generating tens of thousands of points of data. And so many times now, like, and Craig Stevenson in the audience and I were talking about this earlier before we came on stage, is how we manage that data is a huge challenge, right? And so my question to y'all is, how do you start to build a data culture, particularly in the construction industry, where the data is appreciated? And then the additional piece of that I'd love to learn is talk about that in the terms of utilization of a technology, whether your own or a piece that you've just implemented. How are you building that data culture, and what's an example of a technology you're using to do that?
So we've had this conversation a million times. I think you know what I'm going to say. And it's about, for us, it's about, we think that digital twin technology is really going to be useful throughout the life cycle of a construction project. So architects and contractors.
And explain digital twinning.
Okay, so for us, because there are many definitions of digital twin, everyone has a different definition. For us, we use a digital twin technology called Ursulio. We take Revit files and we build a digital twin from the Revit file of the building itself. And then we use that digital twin over the life cycle of a project to collaborate with architects and engineers and owners. So if the project is in Michigan and the architect, engineer, and architects and engineers and owners are somewhere else, they don't have to be flying up to Michigan. They can be collaborating. Granted, they should visit the job, but if there's a quick question that needs to be answered, it makes it a lot simpler. You can collaborate using the technology. We think it's really interesting. But one of the biggest challenges, so this is where the question of starting with the challenge comes in, is when we hand over a project to an owner, we have to hand them warranties, all the submittals, all the RFIs, all the information associated with that building. We basically have to create an owner's manual of the space itself. And in the past, that has been zip drives. And who's even heard of a zip drive anymore, right? Or USBs or Google Docs or paper. All of this information gets shoved into a closet and something breaks. And the facilities manager has to find the warranty, has to find the owner's manual. Well, now with this technology that we're using, and we're beta testing it, it's not perfect yet. You click on the asset. It's an air handling unit. You click on the asset, all the information is in a database. The warranty, when it was installed, like kind of talking about what you were saying with the bridge. All of the detail about the specifics around that building are right there in front of your face instead of being shoved in a closet or in a box or in the attic. So that to us is advancement in terms of the way a project is managed, how it's handed over, and how it's managed over time. And what is really interesting, and we had this conversation in our very first meeting, is that then all of a sudden, when it comes time to decommission or renovate a building, you have a database of everything in that building. So you hand that to the architect who maybe designed that building initially, and they say, oh my gosh, now we can think about material reuse. Now we know every single material and every single piece of asset that's in that building. Now all of a sudden you've got not only a database that the facilities managers can use, but a database that can be used to think more sustainably about how you renovate or decommission.
That material reuse is a big piece. I actually just had an experience today with one of our project managers, Chuck Grabner, over in the Beaver River Bridge. And so Beaver River is a massive new bridge on the turnpike, but 10, 15 years ago, we had done an adjacent bridge, Fay Construction did, and we just happened to have the files still. And that information allowed us to save tens of thousands of dollars on material reuse for the reclamation of that structure. So you multiplied that, like you're saying, Michael, it's a huge impact.
Well, and also, if you think about it and you say, okay, great, if we have 10,000 buildings and that information becomes public, well, then maybe we then have a material reuse database that can be used. Our architecture firms can go to it and say, oh, look, we can pull this, right? I just think there's there's a lot of opportunity. And actually, Joseph Lee is the one that brought this up initially. And so Joshua Lee, brought that up initially. And that piece of it, I got to give him credit. That really fascinates me, to have this like national or global material reuse database.
It's amazing. Azada, data culture and a piece of technology that you've used.
Well, I want to go back to the digital twin idea. So this, a lot of people are using digital twin, virtual replica with IoT sensors and all kinds of information. So a lot of people are thinking about, material reuse and stuff. But I had a PhD student who we were interested about behavior and satisfaction. So
in terms of consumer, like the user of buildings?
So at CMU, buildings are, I actually think the first thing we talked about when we walked into the space was, it's cold in here, right? So at CMU, a lot of the spaces are cold, especially in summer. You go in, well, not CMU, everywhere, all office buildings. You go in and it's cold. And it's usually women feel colder than men. So one of my students was thinking about, how do I use digital twin and IoT sensor to understand satisfaction and behavior? So we realized that in a lot of spaces, we have microclimates. There are areas, there are pockets of colder, hotter. So we put sensors all over the space and we tested it. And every time we're cold, we're dissatisfied, what do? We sent a message to FMS, facility managers, and we're like, it's cold here, it's hot here, 2 degrees, 5 degrees, 1 degree, because they remove the thermostat, so you can't just go adjust it. And usually if you can adjust it, you're so cold that you go and you turn it up like 10 degrees because you want instant. And you feel like if you go 10 degrees, you're going to get that satisfaction. And then you forget and you go up and down, which means more energy is being used. So her idea was, why not use the digital twin idea and make put sensors everywhere and make it live. So when users are about to go into space, they can see it on a screen. They can see the temperature range. And then we'll test it. So first we have them go in, and then we ask how cold, hot they are, how satisfied they are with the space. And then we go do another session where now they can see the screen, they can pick where they want to be, and then they sit. So many people the second round were so much satisfied. Like they were so much happier because they were like, I know, like I'm a person that's always cold. So before I go in, I like to have that information. And less dissatisfied end users. FMS was obviously very happy because you don't constantly send the message. So digital twin really can be used for user satisfaction too. And if users are satisfied, we save a lot more energy. So
that's a good point. Awesome.
But I don't think I answered your question.
No,
I don't remember your question. So.
That's how you optimize. You're optimizing the information, right? Like, I think that's a big piece that happens is you create data, but then it's not utilized or underutilized. And so that's a great example, I think, of taking this information and putting it to good use.
I mean, being at CMU, we're all about data. So we do simulation every day, all the time. We generate data. We do AI. We do VR. We embed data in VR. So I deal with data a lot. But luckily, CMU has a large cloud, so everything can just go in the cloud, and I don't have to deal with the zip drives or whatever the thing was. That was like
years ago. Not on a floppy disk.
Floppy disk.
Yeah. John, to you, what are some of these examples where you're trying to build a data culture and some of the tools?
So I'll take a step away from the digital twin. We do leverage it actually at the Beaver Bridge, Bentley Systems, by the way. So throwing that out there. But one of the areas that we always get asked, and me specifically by leadership in our company, is, well, we have all the data. Why can't you just get the information? And that's a very vague and general question. And what do you want to see? And the biggest area that we stumble upon is, are we actually collecting it? That's the big one. Are we actually collecting the data? Some might think that we're doing it, others might not. And it goes back to speaking with the field. Are we doing our job from the back office to allow our end users in the field to collect the data to report on it? And I partnered with Grant here over the last year and a half on our carbon footprint. And one of the areas that we stumbled on right out of the gate was, Well, if we just did steps X, Y, and Z, we would be able to get the information that Grant was looking for. Were we doing steps X, Y, and Z? No. Just being blunt, we were not. But we were able to get the information by piecemealing from A, B, and C. It's all intertwined and linked together. Everyone, I'd say 10 years ago, everyone was like, oh, big data.
Big data.
Big data. Anyone use big data anymore? It's all LLMs, large language models, and how can life be better? But in the construction industry, and this is just my opinion, we're 5 to 7 years behind everyone else in the tech world. Does everyone kind of agree on that? Maybe even more?
100%.
Okay.
You say more, Michael?
100%.
100%. Yeah.
So what we're trying to do is just clean up the processes to get the better data, to get information quicker to decision makers. And that's the thing. It goes back to how much we're in a business to make money. And cleaner, better data is better decision-making information for our leaders. And that's really where things lie.
I think that's fascinating. Thank you for giving a plug for carbon data collection.
Yeah, not a problem.
Oh, Brittany, on to you. I mean, obviously, we want you to talk about Qflow. I hope you don't use another technology. But so I want to put that caveat there first. But what are some of the things that you're finding in terms of building data culture, either before, during, or after an implementation, I would say, too?
Yeah, well, I think actually you just touched on the point incredibly well. The thing that we notice most significantly in our industry is that our industry thinks it has loads of data. And in fact, it came up in our conversation this morning with CMU. It was like, I've got loads of data. I'm drowning in data. I just can't access it. And there's this big void. And we're actually releasing a report in a couple of weeks on specifically this point around data quality in the industry. And when we think about data quality, we break it down into 7 areas. And 7 is a tricky number, but there's a lot of pieces that make up data quality. But the ones that are really key for our industry is completeness. Are we actually capturing it? Is it complete? Is it complete enough to actually give us anything useful? And then accessibility. Can we read it? Can we reach it? Can we get it into the hands of the right people at the right time in the right format? And actually, although we are drowning in data in this industry, it is such poor quality that we have this huge issue of trash in, trash out. And this is why, as an industry, we can't leverage LLMs, the large language models, so the things that AI is built on, or that the general purpose AI is built on. Sorry, AI is very broad. And so actually what we've got as a problem with an industry is there's this huge, huge potential that we cannot realize, we cannot leverage, we cannot access, because our data quality is so poor. So if I could deliver one thing to this industry as a sort of data cultural change, or just a cultural change in general, it would be this understanding that, we have a quality issue around our data. And if before we can do anything with technology, whether it's digital twins, AR, VR, any of the acronyms, we must get the data quality piece right. Otherwise, we will just be doing trash in, trash out.
Is that an input challenge?
It's multifaceted. I think input is a big piece of it. And so with the data that we ingest in Qflow, 95% of it is enriched by Qflow. So the way Qflow works, just to give you guys a bit of context, is construction teams will take a photograph of the bill of ladings or the goods received note that comes on with materials. So that is a piece of paper typically. Sometimes it's a PDF, it doesn't really matter, but they'll take that picture. We then use a load of AI, generically, to pull the information out of those images. And we will pull out things like the name of the manufacturer, the trade or the subcontractor that received it, the type of material, how much of it there was, where did it come from. In 95% of those images that we process, there is something missing. There is something that is inconsistent. So they'll name their manufacturers 20 different ways. It's the same manufacturer providing this document, but they will name themselves 20 different ways. And so there's this huge amount of cleaning and enrichment that has to go on with this data just to make it usable, just to mean that you can analyze it. And when you look at who's my supply chain, you don't have 20 versions of Travis Construction or Travis Concrete, you have one Travis Concrete. They've just delivered you 20 different batches of concrete, then they've named themselves 20 different ways. And so there's that piece that needs to go on. And it's not just about the human input, which is incredibly error-prone when you're relying on humans, but it is also about the way that our industry produces and generates data. We're just not very consistent. And it's because we are 5, 6, 10, 20 years behind where we probably need to be.
Brett, let me just say something. And for us, now that we're in there, QFlow is integrating with Procore, that if you think about, you take the data that's now a lot cleaner because QFlow has cleaned it up, and then we can use AI in the digital twin to identify that's a Hitachi air handling unit. And now we can the AI can pull the owner's manual instead of me manually attaching that owner's manual to the Hitachi, asset. The system can say, oh, this is a Hitachi air handling unit. We know that because we have the submittal in Procore, and it's been cleaned because of the AI that QFlow is.
And this is where that potential for the industry really gets unlocked because, and this came out of the Advancing Construction Decarbonization Conference in Denver early this year. One of the guys who was on one of the panels said, technology needs to be integrated, not additive. So it's not meant to be adding work on site. It's meant to be integrated perfectly. Integrated, not additive, is only possible when you have clean and consistent data. Otherwise, you're matching apples and pears, and you cannot integrate apples and pears. They do not match. So it's this whole idea of being able to unlock all the potential of technology is only possible when you get the data quality piece right.
That's amazing. That's a good point. Going into that, Beth, for you, this same kind of question, you guys are using, tons of technology, tons of data. What is that cultural starting point, and what's kind of your technology example?
Yeah, I'm really grateful to come after your answer because I thought your answer was so perfect to lay this foundation of data quality, because even the people who have really sophisticated systems don't know how bad their data quality is. Even public institutions that share their data for research purposes have no idea how bad their data is. And so we talk about this relationship between publisher and subscriber. If you are publishing data, the accountability is on you to make sure it's clean. If you're subscribing, your responsibility is to peer review that data. If you start as a subscriber, but then you publish, so go another layer, you now have the accountability to ensure that your data's clean and that it's accurate. So a couple of things I'll note, Grant, is one, what we could do as an industry, as a service to all of our clients, is to help them understand what questions to ask. They don't know what questions to ask, and they're so easily guided.
You mean at the client level, just to be clear?
Yeah, the client, building owners, institutions, they don't know what questions to ask of any of us. And so because of that, they get really pulled by shiny objects. Yeah. And I think we do ourselves a collective disservice if we don't take clients back to brass tacks and square one and use cases, and then help them build on where they want to go. And your point about data, we commission every piece of equipment in every building. We never commission the data. And that's where we're headed. We are headed towards data commissioning.
There should be like a QA, QC process.
Absolutely.
For data. Yeah.
Absolutely. Every project that we've done or that we'll do going forward will have the right people at the table who do that Div 25, Div 27 work and can commission data. Because if you start out and the first time you publish that data, if it's wrong, it's going to be wrong every time somebody's subscribing to it.
And if you get to a large language model, then it's all messed up.
Then it's all, and the people who are taking it as subscribers are presuming that whoever published that data is accurate and it's complete. And so there's this relationship. If we keep talking more about the publisher and subscriber, I think it resonates with people. Like you get it really quickly, right? And so if we can, I think, have more of those conversations, then we'll do, I think, a great disservice to getting us up that curve faster.
Is that on the owner to be the QA QC, or who does that?
No. I mean, generally speaking, the people who clean the data are the ones that either built the data standard. So if you have a master systems integrator or a Div 25, Div 27 engineer who built whatever the standard is around the data, they would be, I think, the natural place. But if you have, let's say you have an existing building, so let's just go into that world, and you already are established and you already have all your processes and procedures, and you can't get your data. And if you do get your data out of proprietary systems or whatever operating technologies you have in a building, if you get your data, then there's an opportunity now to clean it and make sure it's right and make sure it's complete and make sure if there's backfill of data, it happens. If there's interpolation, it happens. If there's, right, like whatever you have to do to make sure that data is clean. Now, Matt Kaufman from Normal is here, and they do data integration off any system, any existing building, off any set of systems, off any operating technologies. They're located here in Pittsburgh. They do a really great, really fantastic job. It's solving this notion of how do I get my data? So there are ways to pull this thing together that aren't costly. They're absolutely not expensive, but you have to be smart about it. And then you have to think, well, once I get the data, where am I going to put it?
Right.
And that's the next piece of kind of the whole data process. But
that's awesome.
Bibhuti will have a point on that too.
Teed it up. Bibhuti, to you, same question. This idea of data culture, and how do you build that? But then also an example of a technology that you've worked with, in terms of helping to build that culture.
Tough to add value to the wonderful answers that have already been stated. I think the point about data quality cannot be overstated. And I think one of the ways we're looking at that, so I think there are a couple of things that I want to touch on from what we're looking to do at Bentley Systems perspective. One, you have to support standards, whether they be international standards like ISO standards. Yes. That's one way to help deliver quality projects. That incorporates, QA, QC as part of the workflow, making sure you're meeting the deliverable milestones so that you are delivering quality.
There is some sort of a protocol that you're following.
Absolutely. There's a standard protocol, and then you have to have technology that also makes the validation of data easier, because if there are standards, you don't want to manually check those things. If there's a standard, can you just run some sort of query to say, well, these bits of data, they look like they're outside of the acceptable thing. Can you check to make sure? So make QA, QC easier. You have to do it, but it doesn't have to be super painful to do. But I think ultimately, if you don't have good quality data, any analytics you do, any decision support you do on top of that, you're compounding the mistake. So absolutely agree on that. And I think something you touched on about integrating data or making sure data is accessible. From a Bentley Systems perspective, one of the things that we've really done over the last few years is focus on our iTwin platform, which is an open source technology that allows you to integrate data from whether it's third-party, Bentley, in-house systems. And I think that's a really important thing, is people cannot be locked into a particular vendor. I think at Bentley, we recognize that as much as we would love for you to do everything in Bentley, you have lots of different things that you use to get your work done, and it's all about getting your job done in an efficient, cost-effective way. And part of what we have to do as vendor or as technology vendors is to make sure that you can actually integrate data from different systems. So interoperability is super important. So to answer your question about data culture, I think open source, openness, interoperability are things that we really value in the company, and we're working very hard to just have as a deep part of our culture.
That's a great point. Since we have these long panels, you get the next question first. So like Michael will be, have to come up with something quick at the end after all these great answers. Just to build off that a little bit, I think this idea of, data culture, selecting technology, implementation is the next phase, right? I was going to ask you guys, like, what's a successful example? But give me the bombs. What has been a technology? No, you don't have to give like full frontal kind of, like, oh my God, this is terrible. But like, give an example of an implementation process where it had a hiccup. And what was the lesson that you learned?
I have to start with that question.
You got to start with that question. That's it. And it doesn't have to be a big thing, but people challenge. The actual technology created a problem, but something that was effectively like the uh-oh moment.
I don't know if this is a bomb per se, but I think this is a very typical thing we run into is when you deliver a new kit, a new bit of technology, you immediately think, oh, this is immediately going to make people's lives better. But I think there have certainly been situations where we haven't factored the people angle of it, their level of comfort with new things. And then it's really difficult to replace the feeling that, well, this has been working for me for 15, 20 years. You better provide a much more significant return. And one of the things that we've seen is marginal returns don't cut it for that kind of change. They have to be orders of magnitude difference. If it's not a 10x improvement in what I'm doing, whether it's cost, efficiency, don't bring me new technology. A 5% improvement is a really difficult thing for me to change what I'm doing. And I think 5% improvement is pretty good. Even 10% is pretty good. But it's not good enough to change a process that people have been living with for many years. So I think from my own perspective, that's what I've kind of recognized. And I think the benefits and the potential of the technologies that we're talking about today, they're not incremental improvements. These are orders of magnitude improvements. In fact, some of the things that I've heard from one of our contractor partners is it's almost like you're driving you're riding a horse and a buggy and a car whizzes by. You're gonna say, "Oh, what was that? Like, I want that." Like,
right.
You're gonna have to learn how to drive the car. I mean, there are things you have to learn, but when you see that benefit, that's the kind of benefit you need to see in order to be able to convince people that you might need to give up the horse and the buggy because there's something there. I don't know what that is, but I want that.
I want that.
Yeah.
That's a great example. Beth, how do you turn lemons into lemonade?
Yeah, I kind of alluded to the one example where, a really sophisticated organization thought it had really great data and was doing some highly advanced data analytics on that data and giving it to other people to do research on. I mean, it's a hard conversation to have, to go to them and say, we've checked your data 3 different ways and it sucks all 3 ways.
Yeah.
Like, that's a really hard conversation to have. So I guess kind of what we've learned over time is, you have to have those conversations as quickly as you can, because the more time that goes by, the more difficult it becomes.
Yep.
And the more they feel like, you kind of strung them along to just drop this big bomb on them. And the other thing I think that's been kind of a really important learning for us is whether it's on the building science side of our business, which drives to zero, right? We use building science like passive building science and passive house in order to get to zero, or the data science side is no matter what any client tells us about their ESG goals or their intentions, profit matters.
Yeah.
And, if you think somehow they're just going to miraculously come up with more budget because they're intellectually aligned, that's just never going to happen. So we kind of go into every project today saying it doesn't cost $1 more, because it doesn't. It doesn't have to cost $1 more. You just have to be smarter about how you get there. And we've stopped the whole kind of mirage around value or benefit, because I just don't think that it's as real as some clients want to believe it is. Their intentions are so good and so meaningful. But as ESG becomes that much more difficult to achieve, and you have to climb higher up in the tree to pluck the fruit to deliver those results, that profit piece matters, that return on investment matters.
That's a good point. Brittany, how do you take like a problem, data problem or technology problem that was bombing and turn it
I can definitely talk about something that tangs. So my co-founder and I were both from construction, and so we very much focused on the pain we're trying to solve and the people first. And so when we designed Qflow, we tried to make it idiot-proof, and like in the nicest way possible.
Right.
So the sort of tech literacy threshold we went for is like, if you can take a selfie, you can use Qflow. That's kind of what we were asking people to achieve. So that was okay. So we kind of nailed the usability piece, and we thought that was enough. But the emotional cost of switching was so much higher than we fully appreciated at first. So when we first started deploying Qflow back in 2018, 2019, we were going to contractors who were being a bit more pioneering, who had that, like, I'm committed to being better kind of attitude. But often we were finding that they were like, well, we don't have a project that's starting right now, but we've got this one that's already running. Let's pilot you on that one that's already running. Oh, bad idea. Because what we found was actually getting the site teams to change a process that was already so deeply embedded for them in a project that was already in flight. They were like, nah, like, I've been doing this the same way for so long. Like, the project's almost over. Why would I bother? That emotional cost of switching was way too high to overcome. No matter how easy or how much time it would save them, the emotional cost was too high. So very quickly, we learned that the painful way by running a load of pilots that just, like, they just did not take off, and we didn't learn as much. They didn't learn as much as we wanted them to. We learned some good things, but it just didn't take off in the way that we needed. So after that, we were like, nope, if you've started on site, we're not deploying. It's got to be from day one. It's got to be before you've put those processes in place, before that team has got their sort of feet nicely dug under the table.
Because then you have to re-engineer the engineering in many cases.
Exactly, yeah. And so since then, absolutely fine. And we've never had that issue again. But we had to be so hardline with our clients that we will not deploy partway through a project. If you're more than a month in, that's it. I'm sorry.
That's a great point. John, implementation challenges or lessons learned?
So I can do two different kinds, well, way more than two different kinds of failure. But one is, not truly listening and understanding what the people's end users' problems were. Happened at S&B. Came with an issue saying, this process is way too manual, way too tedious. It's taking too much time. We go through and we're like, well, if we leverage this software, this would make it better. Come back, we sit with the end users. It's like, well, we're doing the same thing in a different software. Perfect. We really messed this one up. And then it's kind of a re-engineering on the fly. Like, okay, so how can we make this better? And, go through that. And just like was said previously, with our processes that are currently ingrained, some of these projects have been on the ground running for the past 2 years. And we come in as like, well, how can we start committing costs better? How can we start tracking quantities better? How can we do all this better? Well, we have to change all the way back to the original estimate. It's like
beginning.
Well, this project's, 85% complete. That's a big no. We're not going to do it there. And it's like, well, this project's only 20% complete. And then that's a really big business decision to make. You have to sit down with leadership and say, well, if we do this, X, Y, and Z could happen. If we really mess this up, we could set this project back. And we all know that margins aren't great as is. And if we're going to be allocating our field to doing extra work that might not pay off, oh boy, we got to have our ducks in a row to make sure that we're doing the right thing for the project. And we all sit up here, and that's what it is. It's the right thing for the project, not us. We're solutions providers and integrators, not anything other than that.
Right. That's a good point. Implementation lessons learned.
Again, for me, it's a little different because of, I teach. But the challenge, I can say that it, for me, for years has been the garbage in, garbage out. So every time there's any kind of simulation involved where, there's a model, whether it's for teaching or for a real project, I have this huge fear of who's on my team and who's running the simulation, because there has been so many cases where, the team ran a simulation, they realized they needed more windows or different kind of glass because the space wasn't getting enough light. And they went on and on and on. This design was completely transformed because of the result of the simulation. And then I just happened to go back and look at one thing, and I realized, the surface of the glass was inwards. And that changes your simulation results, for example.
Yeah.
And then you're like, wow, now I have to so I think the garbage in, garbage out has been the biggest challenge for me. But there are also amazing benefits. We've also had cases where we saved a lot of money. We added more to the building. We saved a lot of money because of the simulation and because of the data that we received. So
it works both ways.
Yes. Yeah. But it's my nightmare, though, the garbage in, garbage out. So I can't trust any data.
That QA, QC police that Beth wants is the end, the big solution ultimately.
Yes, that's me. And I'm coming up with strategies of how to build intuition. So I've gotten to a point of, if I look at a number, I've ran so many simulations, and so if I look at a number, I can kind of guess if it's right or wrong, and it's really being in this business for forever. But also, I had a advisor who made me walk around Cambridge, Massachusetts with a light meter, and he was like, feel it, see it, feel it, see it. So I do the same thing to my students. I tell them, take a light meter, see it, guess what it is, look at the numbers. It's a way of connecting the numbers, the value that you see, with the intuition. So if there's a way we can figure out how to build better intuition, so if you look at the data, you're like, I don't know, but something's iffy.
Trust but verify, yeah.
Yeah, so
interesting.
So if anyone has any good exercise, let me know.
Michael, lessons learned from an implementation?
Choose the right partners. I say that because, as you know, we've been working with Ursulio for quite some time, and we've played a very large role in functionality development. And when we started with Ursulio, we were building the system on the Unity platform, which was great. It's a gaming platform. It's easy to use. My nephew could drive around the building, but Unity as a team didn't really understand what we were trying to accomplish. As a company, they didn't understand what we were trying to accomplish. And so along comes the Omniverse, NVIDIA. And then all of a sudden we were like, wow, this is great. And they were really bought in. But we had spent 5 years with Unity, and we walked away from Unity because they weren't the right partner. And it was a hard lesson. It's challenged us quite a bit. But we see NVIDIA as being the right partner because they understand what we're trying to accomplish. They have multiple simulations, like clash detection. Unity, the clash detection in Unity is someone shooting somebody else in the game, right? It's not clash detection as we understand it as contractors. So they've afforded us this new opportunity to work really in a collaborative way. And so that's, I think, my biggest lesson in this whole experience that I've had. And whether the company survives or doesn't, it's a startup, you never know. It's about making sure that the partner you choose is the right partner. And
that's terrific. Thank you. In the time we have, I have one other question, but I want to kind of pivot out to the audience a little bit to see if you have any questions for the panel, and give you that moment to do that.
Yeah, always.
Always. Gary?
Okay, so now this is literally speaking, not metaphorically, what I do every day. What I can do today, I couldn't do yesterday. So you were mentioning up there that you kind of see yourself as 8 years behind. I think that was the timing sometime. But that's understandable in a business where sometimes the planning from the very planning stage to the finished stage, it probably takes 8 years. But how is that process affecting you right now? Do you run up against these things where, like you're talking about that data, does something come out like tomorrow that the data completely changes from the data that you had today? And where do you draw the line on spending $20 billion or $20 million or whatever it is at the time? How's that affect you guys?
That's a good question. So how do you make the pivot effectively? I mean, you were just kind of leading into this a little bit about leaving a partner of a long time, right? In terms of prior technology and then moving to NVIDIA.
We spent $3 million building the platform on Unity. and we had to make a really tough decision. It's a really tough decision. And so I'm on the board of directors, and we had some hard conversations, because it was, we either completely walk away from the company because we're not getting the support that we need, or we make a really tough decision and move on and rebuild. Like, we were a brand new company, right? Like, we're not the same technology that we were before, but we have a lot more opportunity. So it's that decision making that really kind of makes you decide, are we going to spend that next amount of money?
Kind of thing, though, where, okay, you just went through this whole thing where you committed to the technology, done, gone, start again. How do we make sure that that doesn't happen?
Well, the issue with things like digital twins and most technologies is that they're so brand new, especially in the construction industry and AEC, because we're so behind the times. So, it's tough in that world to walk away from something that you've worked really hard on, because you're already challenged by your potential customer,
right?
Who doesn't really want to think about,
they just want you to
is my superintendent that's 50 years old and been working in construction forever have any interest in using technology? He's writing in the Green Book every single day. The Green Book is where they keep all of these notes about what's happening on a project. Like getting them to walk away from something that they're really used to, that change of culture, I mean, that all of this goes into the decision on, do we spend more money on this? And does it make sense? Is it going to advance us? And are we comfortable being the first?
Yes, go ahead.
I was going to add, I think as an industry, we kind of screw ourselves on this front. And it's partly down to the fact that we operate on, as you said, razor thin margins. And so investing in the future is so hard, because you're barely making ends meet today. But one of the things that holds us back is the fact that we do have these long timelines, and something that we design today isn't complete for 8 years. So we're always 8 years behind. And Michael...
Just from the construction cycle.
Just from the construction cycle. And Michael, we had this morning in the conversation where one of the things that came up was like, we're not being made to track this data for whole life carbon today. It's not regulated or legislated. And therefore, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to spend the money to do it until I am physically made to do it. And we see this across the industry. And it's really interesting because Australia have just written this into their legislation. And from April next year, they will be made to track this data, and they will be made to report on it. So as an industry, if we're constantly waiting to be made to do it, we're not ready to do it when we're made to do it, and then we're constantly chasing our tails. But it also means that when we talk about things like the circular economy and unlocking the incredible potential that will deliver for our industry, we don't have the foundational information that means that we can do that. If we don't have the digital twins, if we don't know the materials that are in these buildings, if I asked the facilities managers here, they would have no idea how many light bulbs were in this room, or how many panes of glass, or how many square feet of carpet we have. And until we have that information, that foundational information, we're not going to be able to unlock the future potential of the circular economy in 10 years' time, because the buildings we're building today are the ones that we're going to be deconstructing in 5, 10, 35 years' time. So as an industry, we're not investing today in the stuff that's going to really unlock the potential of tomorrow, but it is because we have these painfully thin profit margins. That means that we just can't do that. So it's kind of a catch-22, the opportunities tomorrow with the potential just can't be realized because we're not creating space for it as an industry. And I guess there has to be a point at which we have a conversation as a collective, as designers, architects, contractors, clients, and actually say, guys, where do we need to be in 30 years' time? And if we're going to get there, what do we need to be doing today? And a big part of that is investing in that foundational information. And just the final piece on that, Michael, where you said we'd invested $3 million, and we just kind of like banked it or lost it, I guess. It's not quite as dire as that, because you learned so much in that process. And I know that you've got the foundational code that sits behind it and some of the key pieces there. And as an industry, there's something we can take away from that. that as long as you are thinking about things in that foundational format and saying, I've got the data, it might not be in the right software, but as long as that was always movable, if I can take it from one Excel and drop it into another thing, it's not a lost investment. It just needs to be moved.
Tell that to my VCs.
I know. And VCs are mean, so I feel you there 100%. But it's never, as long as you're doing it in the right way and you're making sure that it is translatable and accessible and it's that integrated, not additive piece, then you've still got that future potential. But we do need to be thinking about how we do it today. And it is hard. It's not easy.
That's a good point.
So that was a discussion about the digital twin as it relates to the physical pieces of a building. There's also the digital twin that is the performance piece of the building, which is all around BEM, right? Building energy modeling or physics-based modeling and simulation. And we have a situation today where we can create this digital thread that brings all of the digital assets of a building into one place that at least sets us up to be able to take advantage of digital progress and technology progress when it comes. If those assets aren't all in one place, and in my company, we're agnostic. We don't do any of this work. We just advise our clients on how to do it all right, in that you want to prepare yourself so that your assets are all in some place where you have access and control over your data. And so I think if we can do a little bit better job on that, we insulate ourselves from this push and pull of technology. At least it can feel a little bit smoother if your assets are all in one place. I think over time, years ago, even 5 or 7 years ago, to Michael's point, I mean, they went out to solve a problem that didn't have a solution. Solving that same problem today is going to look different. I mean, when sensor technologies came out, all of them had to basically become their own operating technology in a building. They had to have control over all their data. Well, now you have so much redundancy in a building where every sensor manufacturer now has their own operating technology. That doesn't happen today. It doesn't need to happen today. There are much better ways of creating a platform that then allows you to plug and play all of your use cases in a much more seamless way. So to the point I think Bibhuti was making about their platform, same thing. It can bring in sources of data from a lot of different places, and it can be agnostic in how it executes what it does. So I think we are now in a position where we can insulate ourselves a little bit from taking too many risks that then don't pay off if we make those investments the right way.
Great points. Dawn, you had a question?
It's kind of a long question. I apologize in advance. I mean, I think there's been a lot of great insights. Technology that doesn't solve a problem isn't worth a whole lot. So it has to solve a real problem. It has to be an incremental improvement in the status quo order magnitude, right? It has to ask the right questions. And sometimes you don't know what you don't know. So that's where a lot of data is missing. But even if there's new technology that checks all of those boxes, there's still the people element, which you touched on. And that's, we're all humans. We're comfortable with this is how we've always done it. And we like wearing our old shoes. We like talking to old friends. So something new, it's always resisted. So how do you overcome the new technology opportunities that provide some of these benefits? How do you get over that human element? We heard one example of a mandate, right? Somebody who said you have to do it. Was that government, or who was saying you have to do it?
So when we've seen the adoption of things like whole life carbon reporting or these more progressive sustainability ambitions, it has been mandated. Typically, from our experience, have been by the client. And that has just been a trickle down of following the money. So the pension funds said, we probably shouldn't invest in oil and tobacco. Let's put it in ESG positive funds. And then that went down into real estate, and real estate said, let's go for lead outstanding, lead excellent. So then, or lead platinum. So then People started asking for LEED Platinum buildings, and therefore it went down to the contractors. And the contractors are like, oh God, we should probably figure out how to do this. And so really it was just following the money. It was just written into the contracts. Now that set the initial standard. And then what we typically see is that regulation brings up the laggards. So the pioneers say, here's what's possible. Then the government goes, okay, now we know it's possible. Let's make everyone do it. And so they then regulate to a certain standard, and then everyone reaches that threshold, and then the pioneers go, oh, well, everyone's doing this. That's not cool. We'll go do something cool again. And then it kind of generally rakes us up. And I know there was a big discussion this morning about how frustrating LEED can be and how valuable it potentially is, and LEED version 5, and it feels like they're constantly raising the bar. Yes, they absolutely are constantly raising the bar, because as soon as you can hit that bar, you should be stepping up again. And it's that constant progression and development that makes us such a phenomenal and exciting industry, but also keeps us on our toes and keeps us frustrated, I think.
It's funny, you just made me reflect on my career progression, which was basically an advocate, then in government, now in the public or private sector. So it's like just follow the trend, basically.
I think it's interesting though when you talk about career progression, because on the how do you bring people with you on that journey, so the people element, not the mandate element. Something I always come back to is, I don't know if you've come across this, but Dan Pink's Drivers of Change. Mm-hmm. And there's 3 things. You've got mastery, autonomy, and purpose. And he says, always bring it back to the why is something happening. And one of the reasons, the purpose, yeah. One of the reasons as a company, we spend a huge amount of money and time invested in our customer success team is because we get that it is so important to work with our clients on the why bit and to bring the humans with us on the journey. So it's not enough to give them the tech, no matter how easy the tech is to use. If you don't get every single person involved in that process to understand why they're doing it, whether that's because they've been told to and it's important for the client, or whether it's because they really believe in building more sustainably and more responsibly, if you don't go through that process of the purpose and you also help them on the mastery, on the autonomy bit, you have control of this, it's in your hands, you have the ability to influence that change, and you're learning a new skill, those 3 things, the mastery, autonomy, purpose bit, can get the humans to change and to change willingly and to feel real satisfaction in that change. So it doesn't have to be stick, it can be carrot, but you have to invest in the carrot.
That's great. John, you had a take?
So one of the approaches that we generally take is the construction industry, as we said, has razor-thin margins. So we have to get the buy-in of the supers and the foremans out in the field. And if you make a mistake and you make an assumption and you don't quite understand what they're actually trying to do or why they're trying to do it, you lost them forever. You're not getting them back. That's just period. Whether the software could be fantastic or not, you made a mistake, you're not getting them back. You lost their trust. However, but if you work and you find and you truly understand what their issues are and you bring them along the journey with you and they buy in from the get-go, because whether it's their idea or not, it's their idea. And they're entering it and they're doing it. And because we're 7 to 8 years behind everyone else, there's a reason for that. Because 2 of the guys love the idea, 15 of them hate it. So we're not going to do it. They're pariahs out in the field for trying to do it because this way works and their way doesn't. But they're also super competitive. And if you kind of make it into a little game, it's the playground theory. Hey, look at these 2 guys. Look how awesome this is. I wish I was joking. Look at the efficiency that they're gaining. And then they start asking, hey, can we do that? Can we do this? And you start seeing more and more and more, and then the buy-in becomes natural. It's nothing that we're mandating and pushing out. They're seeing improvement, and the project's going better and better and better. We didn't do anything except show a couple guys how to do something a little bit more. There is yes, whether they volunteered for the champion or not, they became it. And that's sort of how the best implementations that I found work out.
It's amazing. There's a question here and then one in the back.
And for me, you start down the path, and you don't want to wait till you get to the end of the path to find out that what you're trying to do worked. So I guess from your guys' standpoint, how do you do QA/QC as you're progressing through a project so that you don't get to the end point and realize that the data is not going to recapture that you weren't capturing in the right way, so when you get to the end point, you don't have it thought you were in the head.
So in our world, so let me go to the building science side. We have to train all the way along, so we have to teach. That starts early in design with architects and engineers. You have to build a building differently to get to zero carbon without paying a premium in construction costs. So it starts early and it's frequent. And somebody new joins the team, they have to go through the same process, the same learning. We get into construction, we have to go out into the field, take the subs, the supers, every contractor that's going to touch that project, we have to show them what a properly installed air barrier looks like. And we don't take no for an answer. Like, it's not a matter of, oh, we've done this before. Doesn't matter if it's our project, you're going through it again. Because we know that what's at risk isn't whether or not you get a certification. What's at risk is the performance of the building over time. So we have to get it right in construction. And so if we do that process all the way through and then we bring the building up, the technology that exists in buildings today will become obvious in the first month of the building operating if it met its goals. We don't have to burn the building in for a year to go back then and see how it's performing against itself. So we have a lot more feedback much earlier in the process to know, kind of how we did and answer that question for owners, did you get what you paid for? So it's a process on the building science side. And then the only thing I would add from data is you have to commission your data.
If I can add to that, completely agree with everything you said. On the I'll talk about the transportation perspective, but this is true of any construction in any industry. An area where you see a lot of risk is the things that you actually can't see, the subsurface, the geotechnical, geological. So that's just one example of bringing data together and in context. So it's bringing data together of high quality, but also in context. So survey information, photogrammetry. When you bring all of this information together, what really starts happening is you start getting input from people that are not designers. They may be your stakeholders, public stakeholders, or people that know different disciplines that maybe are not the actual designers. You start getting a lot more input early in the process because people can understand what you're trying to do because there's a lot more context to the work you're trying to do. So this is what the digital twin is really about. It's not just about bringing a bunch of data together or just having a pretty 3D model. It's actually bringing the information together in context, above ground, below ground, and then you start seeing all the areas where you might actually have the biggest problems. If you kept building it, designing it this way, you're going to hit into these utility lines. And that kind of information is very difficult to communicate in the old traditional manual way. But when you have information in GIS, when you have information in survey, when you have information from design, and you bring all of that together, you can start seeing, oh, wow, we actually have to move the design because otherwise we're going to dig into utilities. That's going to be a major problem, and we'll have to call you in to resolve that later, right? So it's all about identifying issues much earlier in the process, and that's how you avoid a lot of the litigation part of it.
I just want to add one more thing. So even if you get everything right, and going back to what Beth talked about, building science, even if you get everything right and you build this building, it's so important to go back and check everything and then go do post-occupancy evaluation. And we do this in building science. We send people, they do post-occupancy evaluation. We get some objective data, some subjective data. I think one of the biggest problem that I have with buildings in general is we don't go back in enough buildings. So how many of you guys know Ernest Codman? I think that was his name. You know, when you go to the doctor and then they talk about some operation and they say 5% chance of this happening, 2% chance of this happening. This is all based on data. They put your information in, they look at based on your gender, age, whatever. These are the possibilities. This was Ernest Codman was the person who came up with this idea long time ago. His idea was after each operation, we should go back in and see what happened to the patient. Why did they die, or why, what happened? And I think that's so important for us because we kind of have to go back in and say, did our intervention work? If not, why not? And that's the question that we don't ask often, because building gets built, it's done, people move in, and then that's it. Forget about it, whatever that building is. And then for someone like me, I've been in this process for like the last 5 months that I'm trying to get energy data. So I'm trying to get utility data, for example, to understand like all the homes in Larimer, because it's one of my projects right now. And it takes forever to sign the NDA document, to get the legal people involved, to get data. And then they're like, well, we have so much data. What do you really want? What do you want to do with it? Well, we want to understand how much energy they're using, right? I don't even have a contact for People's Gas, but that's my next thing. I'm going to go to People's Gas and beg them to give me data.
It's not easy.
It's not easy.
Sorry.
But it would be so great after each building, we go in and we be like, did it work? Why not?
It's a good point.
To learn from our mistakes, I guess.
One final question. Go ahead.
So one of the reasons technology entrepreneurs see is having right product market fit, right? One of the reasons they fail is not having the right product market fit. You all have the real world knowledge, and on the other side, there's a lot of really sharp master's, PhD, entrepreneurs out there. Just out of curiosity, how active are y'all in mentoring and advising and working with technology startups to tell them what the problems are, so they don't feel even a mousetrap that no one wants?
That's a great question. The mentoring component.
It's my favorite thing.
Okay, good.
I think mentorship is one of the best things. A mentor of mine is sitting in the room right now. She's visiting from California, and I've learned so much from her. And to be able to pass on knowledge to people that it's like you have these secrets that you're keeping, and you have to share them because they're so important. And being able to say these are the mistakes I made, I think are really helpful.
Yeah, it's huge. Others?
I think we work with a lot of interns that have come into our product management and product development kind of career path, and I think that's one of the things that our colleagues do really good job of is building up the skills on how to do discovery to address that exactly the point of, are you developing the right thing? Are you solving the right problem? Does it have business value? Will they pay for it? So those are all the types of questions that we try to get those people to understand. And actually, as we're mentoring them, we're constantly instilling that in what we do to make sure that we are ourselves solving the right problems. It's an ongoing learning, even for myself. So that's a really good point about product market fit.
Terrific.
I would just flip that as well. So I did it the opposite way. I was a civil engineer working in the industry and then went into the entrepreneurship side and founded a company. And I actually think there is so much potential hidden among the amazing people that are already in our industry. And actually we could do a lot to be confident enough or just risk-taking enough. And I think the Americans have this a lot less than the British. We are terrified in England. So I think you guys you'll have this a lot less than we do. But to build up that confidence to step out and say, hey, I do know this industry. I do see the problems and I'm going to go and try and fix them, whether that's from outside of the industry in as opposed to inside the industry out. And for Jade and I, we both tried to solve it inside out first, me within Bureau Happold and her within Skanska, but found that was too slow and we were coming up against too many blockers and it wasn't scalable. And so we did outside in. We went and founded the company. And I do think mentorship is incredibly important. And actually, maybe we should be drawing entrepreneurial mentors into construction and engineering and saying, hey, you guys see the problems. How about you go figure out how to fix them? And we'll connect you to the tech people to help you do that. So it could work the opposite way too.
I mean, that is what makes it that much more difficult, right, is our industry. Our industry is a horizontal industry made up of a series of handoffs done the same way for generations. And that is not going to work to solve the generational problems we're trying to solve today. So I don't think I know any technology startup or entrepreneur in the construction industry that isn't spending at least 30% of their time teaching. Right. And that teaching can look like a lot of different things. It can be teaching adjunct classes at a university. It can be teaching young people who come in and just say, hey, I don't know if I want to be in this industry or not. It can be helping people rejigger their careers. It can be with partners, architects, engineers, commissioning agents who come in and just say, hey, where's the puck going? So, I mean, I think anybody in construction doing technology is teaching at least 30% of their time. They just don't even know it. Because we have to. We don't have any choice. The inertia of this industry is such that we would all die if we didn't continue to figure out how to teach everybody kind of what we're doing and why we're doing it.
I love the Wayne Gretzky analogy there.
Good one, right?
You know, just a quick plug too, to take the moderator's prerogative. I mean, because I love that question too. We're doing two things right now. Or we did one thing and did one thing recently, which was we just sponsored a program at the University of Pittsburgh through the Swanson School of Engineering called Moving the Cities. And one of the things that was like super fabulous about it was the point that the teams weren't all engineers. So it's kids from 10 universities from around the world. They come to Pittsburgh. They go to a Steeler game. It's awesome. But they were all multidisciplinary. So you had one engineer in each group. You had somebody that had a marketing background. Somebody was in public policy or political science. And they all tackled the problem differently. But they did it together. And I think that was really fabulous. And then the second example was a program that we had in Tel Aviv, which was, and this is a quick pitch for maybe all our friends here, was called InfraLab. And InfraLab was a partnership between our company, Shikun & Banui, and L, which is an Italian engineering conglomerate in the Ministry of Innovation. And we seeded technology investments in startups to address major infrastructure challenges. And so we brought them along the way in the process. What you see is like any other incubation, you know, some fail, some make it, some are kind of like treading water, but everybody gets a piece of that process because they're a part of the industry and they can see firsthand and use, to your point, like use their technology skills to help solve some of the world's biggest challenges, which is our built natural environment. I would like everybody just to join me in a round of applause for our audience and panelists, for our audience, if you can give them a round of applause for being with us tonight. I'd just like to thank Volpac Construction and the Duquesne Club here for hosting us and sponsoring this great event. Thank you all for your great insights, you guys for your great questions, and thank the team at Pittsburgh Earth Day also for helping to bring us all together this evening. So thank you so much and have a great evening. Be safe.